award ceremonies and things like that. So off he went in the morning to go to his awards thing, and he was receiving a few awards that evening. And during the course of the day, his wife, his future wife, sent him a WhatsApp message saying to him, "I'm really proud of you. You've done great this quarter. Well done on the achievements. Enjoy the day. Have a good time tonight. Stay out as late as you like." That was her message. It was typed in WhatsApp and sent to him. He received that message. Now, he'd been working on one of her values for that week, and that was a value um, of loving and just giving gifts and things like that. So he made an effort to leave after he had received his awards. He got a Goodfellows taxi and he made his way home. And on the way home, he stopped and he bought her some flowers and he bought some chocolates. And he would normally get home from these functions around about 3 in the morning. He got home just on midnight. And she had locked the bedroom door and locked herself inside and gone to bed. And she was angry with him. And he woke up the next morning and found the gifts that he had bought in the dustbin. And she didn't say two words to him at all, ignored him, and went off to her job. And he went off to his job. And there was this tension. And it lasted for almost an entire week. So I said to him, "But why were you angry? What was the reason?" He actually came home earlier than what he normally did. She said, "No, because I actually wanted him to come home early. I didn't want him to stay out late." So I said to her, "But why didn't you communicate it in that way? What you said in your WhatsApp to him gave him no indication of what you actually desired. You set him up to fail, you know? And how is he supposed to interpret that that is what you wanted?" So, I mean, that's not necessarily an example of listening, but it's very bad communication. And we'll talk more about that next week when we talk about the second part of communicating, because he didn't misinterpret anything. It was there and it was written. So it had nothing to do with his 2 ears, but he used his 2 eyes to process it. But he couldn't become a mind reader and get into a place of trying to understand something from his wife perspective as he isn't her. So anyway, that's a little thing about not paying attention. And I don't think she paid attention to the lesson, because the whole thing fell flat, and she failed in polishing that value because the nasty things came out the closet. But it's really, really important, as I said, when we are listening, to engage and listen to gain wisdom. There's so much that is shared from people that we miss, because we're either too quick to want to give an answer, or we're too quick to want to give our opinion. But scripture says, and it's very wise in the way it says it, "Be still and know that I am God." Be still in your communication with somebody. Let them get everything they need to get off their chest. Let them finish what they're sharing. Let them get it out there, because very often when people do that, when we give them the freedom to speak and they are able to unload, and they know there's an attentive ear that's listening, they find the answers that they're searching for themselves within themselves. So it's a very important part and a very important function in communication is listening. In 2005, I worked with a missionary who had snuck onto a military plane when the war broke out in Afghanistan, and he just became a bit of a homeless guy wandering around Afghanistan and working amongst the people in the villages. And he started a great work there, and working amongst these people that had no idea of Christianity and the faith that we have and that we share. And so he made his way in and out of some of the villages, and he really did start an incredible work there. And he built up a great leadership team of some of the local people that had actually converted to faith. And they used to meet out in the desert at 11 o'clock every night to go and pray. And he said he had been away for some time from the one village, and he hadn't really been involved too much in the workings of what was happening. And he was invited to one of these prayer meetings in the desert. And they all went out to the desert late one night, about 200 of them. And they stood out in the desert under the stars. And they stood in a circle, but stood sort of two by two. And he, being the guest and being the American missionary, thought, well, they're waiting for him to speak. So he started to pray. And he said his first few lines. And the guy, the leader that was standing next to him, tapped him on the shoulder and told him to be quiet. So he looked quite puzzled and he said to the guy, what do you mean, be quiet? You know, he's meant to be praying. He said, be quiet. So he was able to contain himself for no longer than 2 or 3 minutes, and nothing was happening that he could sort of understand or discern. So he started to pray again. And again, the leader stopped him and said, be quiet. And he didn't get what was happening here. And so he carried on. After a few minutes, he thought, well, you know, maybe I should start singing. So he started singing a song. And the leader pulled him aside and said to him, be quiet. He said, do you not know that it is rude to interrupt when God is talking? He said, but what do you mean? He says, we are here to wait, to be still before God, and to receive instruction from him as to what he wants us to do tonight. And he's talking to us as we're standing here, but you keep on interrupting. And as he was having this mini altercation with the leader, people started moving off in twos from the desert back into the village, and they were receiving word of knowledge from God where to go. And they went to people's homes and they shared with people, and they brought people out of their homes and back into the desert, and they were able to share with them the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I mean, when I heard the story, I wanted to hit the missionary myself, but it was just absolutely mind boggling that these people that had no understanding or no, not, I wouldn't say understanding, but they were not experts in our faith, were able to teach this guy an amazing lesson. I mean, it's a lesson you never ever forget. And whenever I talk about listening, that story always comes to mind. We have to be still within ourselves so that we can hear the value in what's being shared. So again, I'll go back to my first point. We've got to listen, and we've got to listen on purpose. All right. And we don't always have to be the ones that have to speak. It's more important we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and let the ears be the filter to make sure that everything gets processed before we open the mouth and say something wrong. All right. So that's what I have to share on the very valuable part of communication, listening. So we need to listen to each other. We need to listen to our leaders. We need to listen to the weakest people in the team. Remember last week I shared about that experience with the CEO of the company, exactly the same thing. We have to be willing to listen and listen intently. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. We had a break in recording. My signal dropped there, so I'm going to post the recording in 2 sections tonight, just so that you're aware. Our communication is very important. The first part is always listening. We tend to listen to react instead to listen to absorb the knowledge that somebody is sharing to us. Prayer is always 2 ways. You can't talk and not listen. If you ask something, how are you going to listen for an answer? And sometimes you just need to go sit on the rock and open your ears and listen. Before you talk, just say good morning or good evening or good afternoon. And then open your ears and open your eyes and your senses and listen to what our Creator wants to tell us. Thanks for that, Andrew. I'm going to, we've got a lot of time left, about 15 minutes. Anybody got any questions to Andrew about communication? Remember, this is the first part. We're going to do a second part next week. The first part is always the most important, is the listening part. You can't communicate without listening. Christina, you're unmuted again. All right, any questions? Put up your hands or just unmute and ask. Andrew is ready. Look at those not so tired eyes. Last night they were droopy. Either way, ask Andrew a few questions. He's ready for you.
Can I unmute myself now?
Yes.
If you have a question.
Yes, well, I wanted to share something. As a physiotherapist, while I was studying physiotherapy, one of our now I can't think of the English word, but never mind. One of the teachers told us that we should always be interested and not try to be interesting, meaning that ask questions, ask your patient or client questions. Don't always speak about yourself, because we very often, especially we reply with our lives, our stories, but we don't listen. And I grew up in a house where my dad would come home and he would tell my mom, oh, he had a terrible day. And my mother would reply with telling him about how terrible her day was. And they had this conversation, but each were having their own conversation. My mom was never interested in my dad's story, and I suppose the other way around too. But try to be interested, or be interested, and forget about being interesting. That's my addition to your to this beautiful story that you told us.
Thank you.
Next. Very wise words there. Yeah, you don't always have to be interesting. Be interested what a person says. Sometimes it's the little things. If you listen to somebody and the words sound like a normal day-to-day conversation, look at the body language, look at the facial expression. And then if you know there's something this person wants to tell you, forget about yourself. Draw out that conversation so that the truth comes out and that person shares what they want to share. Sometimes it's something small for you, but it's a big challenge for them in their lives. And you can maybe give a few words of advice. So if the words don't make sense, look at the facial expression, look at the body language, and get the story out of them. Listen with intent, and then give advice, give guidance. For you, it may be something small. A smile to a stranger for me is nothing, but for that stranger, it's a lot. A word of wisdom or a word of advice for me may be nothing, but for the person receiving it, it may change their day, it may change their week, it may change their lives. Do not be scared to communicate. Who next? You know, it looks like you're going to have an early night. You can catch up. No, you can't catch up on sleep. You must still put the kiddies to sleep. You buggered.
Yeah. No, I want to add a little bit to what you said there. And, you know, when we are journeying in this life and we are trying to become that gift that we spoke about a few weeks back, then we got to learn in circumstances and situations that it's not about us. Going to what Festina said there, be interested and not interesting. We've got a responsibility as leaders to bring out the best in everybody that we deal with. How do we bring out the best in them if everything we're always talking about relates to us or is us? We need to hear from them. We need to be able to understand where they're at and help them to find the wisdom in the things that they are maybe struggling with or needing guidance on, or even trying to celebrate. Sometimes someone comes to share something with you because they're excited and they've just achieved something or they've received great news. And we snuff out their candle because we want to rather steal their thunder and share a little bit about us. And, don't be quick to speak. Be quick and eager to listen. And in that place of listening, you will find the wisdom that is needed to help that person or celebrate that person or elevate them, whatever is necessary in that situation. And again, Stefan reiterated it, and I spoke about it earlier. Look at the body language, look at the eyes, look at the facial expressions, and really be engaged in that conversation. And you'll find you'll take so much more away from it. And yes, you do get people that just like to speak, and they speak for the sake of speaking. But we'll talk more about that next week, because that's got something more to do with talking than it has with listening. But you've got to really in those types of conversations, that's where you've got to put filters on your ears, and you've got to filter through the stuff that is absolutely relevant, and just try and filter out the stuff that's absolute nonsense. It's like tuning your radio, but you get there in the end. So very, very important. We are doing this journey together so that we can grow as individuals. So we find the weaknesses, we find the strengths, we find the things that we can work on in our lives, so that we can become better leaders, that we can be better equipped within ourselves to just engage with people. We're not trying to make the next Springbok rugby captain here, or bring out people that are going to go and lead hundreds of thousands of people. We're just trying to help you become better equipped individually to face certain things in life, certain challenges, so that you can grow into a role of leading, even if it's just your family. But let's help each other and equip each other in the best way possible.
Wisely said. I just thought of something about communication. If you look at the little story of a child, let's say 3, 4 years old, there's a very good example how communication get wrong. If a child brings you a rock as a present, you will say thank you, and you will take that rock and put it on the mantelpiece. That is an innocent present. It's a present from the heart. That's communication. This child selected a rock for you. For you. That's communication. He wants to give it to you. If you now take the rock and say, what is this? You're going to break that child. Build up. Look at the communication from the child. He's giving you something special from his heart. Go put that thing on the mantelpiece, even if it stays there for 7 years or 14 years or more. It's a small thing sometimes. And I've seen many, many times in my life. This morning I went to a place and I had to wait for somebody to come pick me up. And I talked to the waiter, guy from Durban. His name is Manla. And we had a good conversation. And when the other person came, I got a coffee, and when it was, well, we decided to go then. It was time to get me home so I can work. And when I did the transaction for the drinks, Manla asked me a basic question. And it was easy to brush him off. He asked me, sir, why did you talk to me? But I listened intently. He wanted to know, why did I talk to him? Why did I talk to him about my Creator without once mentioning God? And he realized it. Sometimes the listening part is a question. And again, don't listen to respond. You need to answer that question for the question that it is. Don't tell them your story or your version of life. If somebody asks a question, answer the question for them. Go into their situation, place yourself in their shoes, and then help with advice and guidance. Our situations are not always the same. So what may work for you as a solution will not work for that person. Put yourself in that person's shoes and then work on a solution. Where Andrew will go next week, where you talk, the talking part of communication. Communicate to that person according to what was said to you. You don't have to listen to reply with your life story. You listen to reply with guidance for that situation, for that person. And it looks like the people don't want to talk to us. I'm going to start calling names again. Oh, I like that. Pick a name for us on the list.
Let's see.
Yeah, Lupe from Southwest America. What might work for us may not work for them. Everybody's situation is different, very, very much different. Who's got something to tell us here? Where is my friend from KZN, Pietermaritzburg? Mary, you're on. Mary, you want to tell us something about communication? You over-communicate, I know that, but I don't mind. I still love you to bits. What do you want to tell us about listening? I spoke to you about listening a few weeks ago, to be exact, 11 days ago. I phoned you.
Yes. Oh, you've really put me on the spot, Stefan. Yes, I personally am I'd rather listen than speak. But yes, it's just as Andrea says, it's to take in and hear what the person is saying, because it could be so important. And to catch the point and the cognizance of the point. Yeah, you've really put me on the spot here. And it's something that people don't actually do, is to actually listen to when you listen to what a person is saying. And sometimes one has to listen back to what you were saying to know that were you reacting the right way. If
That's a word I wanted to hear from you, cognizance. Listen with understanding. Many times I tell people the same thing over and over, but from my side, I do it incorrectly because I'm not using the right words. If a person does something and is asking for advice how to do it differently, communicate in a way that the person can understand. Yeah, thank you for that. Somebody had their hand up here, but I missed now. Who was that?
Michaela.
Who?
It
Michaela.
was me. Yeah. I just wanted to add to what Mary said there. What I found very often in the career that I had, which was so important, was to pay attention to little detail. You know, the finer detail is really the art of listening. And just being quiet, really, just being quiet inside. You know, very often what I tend to do, from a believer's perspective anyway, is that if I'm in a situation I find myself that I don't really identify with, and yet I know that this is a appointment that is important, whether it is for the receiver or for me, doesn't matter, you know. And then what I very often do is that I just ask the Lord to grant me insight and to grant me wisdom or understanding, or maybe something, whether it is within a word or a gesture. Like you said, you know, if one happens to be present with a person, even in their facial expressions or intonation of voice, I tend to do that. That's, to me, is very important, is to listen with the ear, is to hear. You hear so much more in a tone than in diction, if I can put it that way. So yeah, listening is really an art, quite right. That's what was said in a comment as well. And
No, it's a skill.
it's
The
not
skill
easy.
can be learned.
Absolutely. Yeah, it
Skill
can be
be
learned, yes. You know, that's something my parents, that's one of the most wonderful things that they've left us, our family, in a legacy, I would say, is that both of them, in a very unique way, were brilliant listeners. They really were. And when it was important to say the most important things, they just summed it up really in one or two sentences, you know. Whereas most of us tended, as kids, we used to go overboard. My sister and I in particular, we tend to go overboard the whole emotional shebang, I should imagine. But my mom was brilliant, and so was my dad, both of them. Total opposites, by the way, but they really were. And I don't know if that was part of their upbringing, you know, that they just really learned in their time to listen, you know, to pay attention to detail. in that way. But I for one am deeply, deeply appreciative of that which they left and they taught, you know, from that perspective. Yeah,
That's
that's all I
brilliant.
wanted to say. Mm.
Thanks for that feedback. Right,
You're
Annie,
welcome.
we've got 3 minutes left. Annie, you got your hand up from.
Yes, this is Annie from Dayton, Ohio, in the USA. I just want to say this has been a great conversation. For me, communication is very important because I deal with people. I try to listen. And as I'm listening, if I don't understand, I ask the question to them. If this is what you're saying, because I try to get clarification. And then I come back and like wrap it up and do a recap. So we're all on the same page, because sometimes your body language can sense something differently. So that's why I try to be engaged and just try to listen, ask the question, and clarify if this is what you said. So we have to pay attention to body language as well. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very true. If you listen to reply, your body language will be completely different when you listen, to absorb what the person is saying, and they will realize that. Now, that's very wise words. Right, we've got about a minute and a half left. Everybody warms up in the last 5 minutes and wants to talk so much. Anybody else wants to say anything before we close off? Remember, there will be 2 recordings, a little short one and a longer one with a bit of a break in between. Doesn't mean you miss anything. Next week, when we carry on with the second part, when Andrew present talking, we can carry on if there were questions or some things that you missed on the recordings. I don't know. I think there's about 2 minutes that got lost. It's not the end of the world. End of the world is still far. We will not know when it comes, but it's still far. We all know that. Or the ones that got some insight into that. Right. I'm going to ask you to unmute and then shout bye. Recordings will be up to 20-25 minutes, depending on my internet connection. We had some thunder and storms here today, so the signal is not 100%, but I'll get it up. Remember, if you watch a YouTube video, subscribe to the channel. We need 1,000 subscribers. Viewing hours is looking good. We're over 4,000. Very soon we can start making money. Before I go, I want to give away one profile to somebody. I've got a cup here. This is a double-sized cup. Let me put another one next to it. That's a normal one. This is what I gave my mother, and when she died, I took it back. If anybody, Christina, you're disqualified because you know what was in here. If anybody can tell me the exact ingredients that were in this cup, there were 2 of them this afternoon, I'll give you a free profile on a fast-moving board. Unmute and shout bye.
Surely there was
Milk and
coffee.
Coke.